Hello and welcome to the first installment of RWBY Dream Machine, a conceptual rewrite of the story featured in RWBY Ice Queendom. In case you don't know about Ice Queendom or didn't care to watch it, it is a real RWBY anime produced by Rooster Teeth and animated by Studio Shaft. The story takes place between volumes 1 and 2 and covers Team RWBY's adventure through Weiss's dreamscape after she is infected by a special plant-like grim called a nightmare. The point of Ice Queendom, or at least what I assume was supposed to be the point, was to show character development for Weiss, and for Blake to an extent, that we didn't get to see in the original series. This character development takes place in a dream world, so we can delve deep into their psyches and examine the feelings and fears they keep locked inside their minds. Things they would be unlikely to say out loud to their teammates, but still need to work through in order to grow. Again, that's what I assume the reasoning was. Unfortunately, the execution left a lot to be desired, and I mean a lot. And I'm going to cover the issues I had while I describe the changes I made and the reasons for those changes. These videos are going to be very different from my previous ones. I mean, as you can already tell, we've got background music and everything. If you enjoyed story time in the past, you're going to like these, because in each installment we're going to go through a large chunk of the rewritten story, before moving on to the designs and the discussion. Today we're going to cover the prologue in Act 1, so let's get started. So the Ice Queendom anime started off with a trio of introductory episodes that basically rehashed some of the most memorable scenes from Volume 1, like the Dust Shop fight, the Emerald Forest initiation and Nevermore fight, and Team RWBY's introduction to Penny and Sun. They also reanimated some relevant scenes from the Black and White trailers. It was a questionable choice, especially considering that a large chunk of the animation resources probably went toward those episodes, even though the actual plot of Ice Queendom probably needed and deserved those resources much more. Generally, it's a better idea to cut corners on things the audience has already experienced before, than to cut corners on things they are seeing for the first time and can't appreciate or understand outside of what you present to them. However, I do think the idea of having introductory episodes was a good one. Underneath all the bells and whistles, I believe the point was to simply re-establish the world of early RWBY, explain the changes they made, and set up the brand new unique plot that the anime is all about. So that's an idea I'm going to keep. Another idea I'm going to keep, and greatly expand upon, is the idea of both Weiss and Blake's mindsets being important to the story. Because even though the anime is called Ice Queendom, and all the promotional efforts focused on Weiss, I believe there's a reason that we got to see both the white and black trailers, but not the yellow and red ones. You can't talk about Weiss's racism without also talking about Blake. Likewise, you can't talk about Blake's struggles against racism without also talking about Weiss. The two character concepts feed into each other, they comment on each other, they are two sides of the same coin. It was clumsy and awkward and it took a while, but the anime eventually acknowledged this in a few small ways. I, on the other hand, am going to let Blake and Weiss share the spotlight from the very beginning. This is a story about both of them. It's going to explore both of their perspectives and allow both of them to grow as characters. And now, without any further ado, let's begin this rough outline of a story. After a lot of introduction and world building from the first half of Volume 1, at some point we arrive at the recap story beat that covers Blake and Weiss's conflict during the Vital Festival preparations. A discussion about Sun leads into a discussion about Faunus in general, during which Blake gets fed up with Weiss's bigotry and accidentally reveals that she is a former member of the White Fang. Everyone is shocked and Blake runs away as usual, and she and Weiss have some time apart to think about what just happened. Blake feels demoralized about being teammates with someone who's so biased against the Faunus, while Weiss feels disturbed about being teammates with someone who may have contributed to the murders and robberies that soured her childhood and family dynamic. Both girls are hurt and genuinely conflicted about what to do, because at the end of the day, they still want to be part of Team RWBY. They may not truly care for each other as friends just yet, but they do care about maintaining the status quo. Blake doesn't want to invite scrutiny that might lead to her getting kicked out of school and or exposed as a Faunus, and Weiss wants to keep up appearances as a star student and model huntress. Basically, neither of them wants to rock the boat. So, after the battle at the docks and Penny's power showcase, which would ideally actually take place on screen, the two girls meet up again and awkwardly reconcile. Weiss gives her fake apology and says she doesn't care about Blake's race or her past, And Blake accepts the fake apology and agrees that it's more important for them to stay together as a team. A happy ending for everyone, or so it seems. Now it's time for the new story to begin. Neither Blake or Weiss knows it yet, but they have both been infected by Nightmare Grimm, and during their little argument, these Grimm took root in their hearts and began to grow. In this AU, the Nightmare Grimm are a little more obvious. Rather than just creating mysterious hallucinations, these Grimm first manifest as a mental voice, another self to talk to the victim and convince them to indulge in self-destructive thoughts. They actively stoke negative emotions to feed on, until that negativity overtakes the victim's mind, and the Grimm can successfully trap them in a coma to continue to feed on their energy until they're dead. Weiss is the first one to get to that point, since the feelings she's experiencing are pretty new to her. All her life, she's been in a position of such privilege that she never really has to interact with Faunus in any meaningful way. They're either a faceless collective other upon which she can scapegoat her family's problems, or just servants who bring her tea and then disappear. But now, all of a sudden, there's a Faunus in her life who's actually important to her. She's a teammate, a classmate, almost a friend. She has to try and get along with her and care about her feelings and opinions. She has to watch what she says about people she's never really thought of as people until now. And I imagine she's most likely struggling with this a lot. She's not sure how to accept the idea that her discriminatory attitude isn't justified just because she's had to suffer. She feels like Blake's criticism of her behavior is some kind of accusation, like she's being blamed for something. And she's afraid that, in her already daunting quest for perfection, she's overlooked a glaring flaw that she doesn't know how to resolve, a flaw that Blake will always be able to see. So her nightmare side tells her, Blake's just trying to tear you down. She's from the White Fang and you're the heiress to the Snee Dust Company. Of course she hates you and thinks you're wrong. But you're not wrong. Blake is the one who's wrong. She doesn't understand what you've been through. All she sees when she looks at you is a member of the Atlas Elite. And if you listen to her, you'll just be letting someone else control you and tell you how to think. Is that what you want after you've come this far? And before long, Weiss gives in to these thoughts and falls prey to the nightmare, and RWBY is the one to witness her collapse. Poor RWBY has no idea what's going on. She takes Weiss to the infirmary at Beacon, but she isn't sure what else to do for her or why she collapsed in the first place. Fortunately, some professor or somebody, Ozpin I guess, recognizes the marks of the Nightmare Grimm on Weiss's skin and explains what probably happened. RWBY asks what can be done to destroy the Grimm and heal Weiss, and receives the business card of a certain nightmare hunter named Shion Zaiden. RWBY immediately leaves to search downtown Vale for Shion's establishment, and happens upon a tiny, dimly lit shop with their name in the window. So she goes inside and finds the proprietor asleep at the front desk. It takes some doing, but RWBY eventually wakes them up and anxiously explains that her new best friend Weiss has been infected by a lethal Grimm parasite, and is probably at death's door as they speak. Shion listens patiently, assures RWBY that the situation is not that dire, and begins a brief tutorial on the art of nightmare hunting. In this AU, Shion doesn't go around hunting nightmares on their own. Instead, they rent their special equipment out to their customers to use whenever and wherever they want. This equipment is powered remotely by Shion's semblance, and allows its users to enter a victim's dreams and defeat the nightmare possessing their mind. There is no coin system in this version, only a timer that gives the user about 90 minutes, so one sleep cycle, to stay in the dream before they wake up. This is just to prevent them from using up all of Shion's energy in one long trip. Once the timer empties out, the user simply turns it over and waits for it to refill before attempting to enter the dream again. Closeness to the victim is not necessary to enter their dreams, but because of the complex nature of the dream worlds that the nightmare creates, it's better for the user to be someone who knows the victim well, so they don't spend too much time wandering around looking for clues. The key to defeating a nightmare Grimm is to find the victim's true self within the dream, and convince them to resist its control and wake up. Before they die. And this is what RWBY is determined to do for Weiss. After she receives a dream machine from Shion, she goes to sleep and enters the nightmare, and wakes up at the top of a mysterious dark tower. She travels downstairs and wanders through the hallways, which are all lined with large mirrors. But whenever she looks into the mirrors, she doesn't see herself. Instead, she sees a little girl who looks like a younger Weiss. RWBY decides not to dwell on this and continues exploring. Eventually, she enters a dark theater with dozens of rows of empty seats. The curtain opens, and a familiar-looking red-haired girl appears on stage and begins to sing. RWBY sits down to listen, mesmerized, and before long she is joined by a third party, a mysterious knight in black armor and white regalia. The knight watches the red-haired girl sing and softly starts to sing along with her. RWBY recognizes the knight's voice as that of Weiss and approaches her, believing she's found Weiss's true self. She hurriedly tries to explain the situation and convince her that she's in danger, but Nightmare Weiss doesn't seem willing to listen. Instead, she calls RWBY an intruder and summons a dark lance, resembling a giant version of Mertenaster, and immediately goes on the attack. RWBY's first instinct is to use her semblance to escape, but instead of zipping away, she trips and falls. It seems that aura and semblances don't exist in this dream world. RWBY realizes that she doesn't have Crescent Rose with her either, and faced with no other options, she gets on her feet and starts to run away. Unfortunately, she isn't fast enough to avoid Weiss's ice projectiles, and gets impaled twice before she finally wakes up, gasping for air. And that's the end of Act 1. So let's discuss some of the major changes I made to how this story starts to unfold. First things first, Xion Zaidan. You probably noticed that I changed quite a bit about Xion's character, besides giving them their own little shop to inhabit. I thought that a little narcolepsy would be a cute thematic trait to add to their character, and it would be an easy way to give an actual reason for someone with an impressive title like Nightmare Hunter to be so oddly inactive in the plot. In the canon show, Xion spends most of their time merely standing next to Team RWBY while they sleep. Their power is in use, but they have literally nothing else to do except answer the phone and dump exposition from time to time. And it's very awkward and boring. But in my version, Xion doesn't do anything because they can't do anything. Although their constant sleepiness may be a little comical, they're essentially living with a disability, which makes it more necessary for other people to do the active work while they stay in an advisory position. Whenever Xion is not on screen, you can assume they're taking a nap, or maybe even dealing with another customer, instead of just standing around. And when you're able to make those kinds of assumptions, you feel more like the character is a real person, rather than a plot device that only exists when the story needs them to. TLDR, a little reasoning goes a long way. The second big change to the story is that Xion is less accessible. In essence, RWBY and the other lucid dreamers are under more pressure to figure things out on their own. When they are in the dream, they can only rely on people who are in it with them. As much as I enjoyed the calling Xion on the phone gimmick in the canon show, it does kind of remove a large element of risk from the character's adventures. Like, when they come up with a new idea, we don't get to see them jump right in and try it out and discover the consequences for themselves. Instead, they just call to get Xion's approval, or they get an explanation or an advance warning, so we already know what the consequences might be. There aren't as many fun surprises. But in this version, not only is Xion no longer a mere phone call away, they're not even in the room with them anymore. If RWBY and friends want to talk to them, they have to completely interrupt what they're doing and go out to see them. And with time running out to save Weiss and Blake, it's best if they do that as little as possible. Over the course of the rewritten plot, they only meet with Xion 3 or 4 times, including the one I just narrated. And I think this has the potential to make a more entertaining story structure, with short moments of instruction and guidance interspersed between longer periods of free play. If nothing else, it means that more time can actually be spent on the stuff that RWBY as a franchise pretends to care about. Kids being creative and working together to solve problems without adult supervision. There's now an incentive for RWBY and friends to help each other through the obstacles they face throughout the plot, to trade ideas and share their unique insights. You know, instead of the usual, "I don't know if we can do this," or "I do know we can do this," cookie-cutter protagonist dialogue. Character dialogue isn't supposed to just comment on the plot, it's supposed to be part of it. and although the way I'm talking through this rewrite is mostly just skimming over the major events, I think this would ideally be a very dialogue-heavy story, with the kids actively thinking and talking through their experiences in the dream worlds, and relating Weiss and Blake's struggles to their own lives. Basically, it'd take the characterization they finally regained in the Ice Queendom anime and do even more with it. Finally, we arrive at the third big change in the story, one that hasn't gotten a lot of time to shine yet, but which you'll see more of in future videos. The dream worlds having a larger symbolic connection to the lucid dreamers who enter them. In the anime, we get a tiny bit of this through the explanations for the lucid dreamers' new outfits and their weapon upgrades. For instance, Blake is dressed up in a mildly questionable kitty costume, while RWBY is a carefree snowboarder with a backwards weapon, because that's supposedly how Weiss sees them. A literal cat, and a silly child that she doesn't care to understand. Unfortunately, that's pretty much where that idea starts and ends. There's no additional depth to the idea of Weiss's thoughts affecting the lucid dreamer's experiences, except for the relatively underutilized concept of the Silly's jail. Only Blake comes across an element of the Ice Queendom that actually says something of substance about how Weiss sees her. The rest gets scraps, and I'm pretty sure Yang gets absolutely nothing. Even her outfit change doesn't say anything in particular about Weiss's opinion. Sure, she looks vaguely adventurous, but doesn't her default outfit already give off the same impression? Once again, it seems our Sunny Dragon has been left out. Anyway, my change starts with that little detail about RWBY seeing her reflection in a mirror, and that reflection being an image of Weiss as a child. The logical takeaway, which I'm sure RWBY will take some time to think about after getting kicked out of the dream, is that in RWBY, Weiss sees her younger, more innocent self from long ago. And maybe her impatience and resentment towards RWBY in real life reflects a deep-seated resentment of certain parts of herself that she's learned to suppress. And furthermore, perhaps her relationship with RWBY could improve if she could learn to embrace or just appreciate those parts of herself, instead of rejecting them completely. At this point in time, I haven't written the next parts of the story in enough detail to know how the other characters might be represented, except for Pyrrha, obviously, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be more little things like that. Minor details that pop up in the environment in a picture is worth 1,000 words kind of way. I feel like the whole point of working with a surreal setting like a dreamscape is to make it do a lot of your talking for you. The way the environment looks and behaves and its limitations and rules should all say something about the people who are in it. I mean, why put your characters in that kind of setting if you're not going to take advantage of it? Why set up an opportunity for a psychological exploration of a character's mind, and then focus on nothing but physical battles that might as well be taking place in reality? Like many things in RWBY, it's wasted potential. Before we go, let's take a moment to examine some of the designs that I created for this rewrite. First, we'll start with Shion's adjusted design since it's the most subtle. I basically just turned up the brim of their hat, simplified some elements of their shirt and sash so I could draw them better, and tightened their pants into more contemporary-looking skinny jeans. The main reason is that, because my version of Shion is usually sitting down or reclining, adjusting their design to make their legs easier to read would lend more interest to those poses. Plus, I think it makes them look a little more casual and easygoing. This Shion isn't a mysterious traveler from an unknown land. They're just a cool huntsman entrepreneur chillin' in Vale. Moving right along, Nightmare Weiss was probably the first design I came up with for this rewrite. I knew from the start that I wanted her to look kind of monstrous, with her face mostly hidden in the glowing eyes. Unlike the Nega Weiss of Ice Queendom, this Weiss is less of a person and more of a construct, something that lives in Weiss's brain and represents a very limited set of ideals. In case it's not obvious, this is not actually Weiss's true self, although it'll take RWBY and friends a little while to figure that out. Last but not least, Lucid Dreamer RWBY and Crescent Rose Hollow. There's not actually a lot to see in this design. My main mission was to make the Lucid Dreamers look a little more like traditional fantasy adventurers, and match the nightmare sides they're working with. So now Crescent Rose is dark and hollowed out and dust-powered like Nightmare Weiss's Mertenaster, and RWBY has Weiss's bright white cape, accented with black in her character color, which gives her a striking resemblance to her deceased mother. That was a complete coincidence, I didn't plan on that at all. Anyway, that's all for now. Tune in next time to see the much more story-heavy Act 2, where Ruby will return to Weiss's dream world with some new allies by her side, and Blake will fall victim to her own nightmare. Like, subscribe, whatever, and I hope to see you there.